At this point in your writing career, you are likely using far more complex sentences than you did in years past. And with more complex sentences comes the need for more commas. That's the most common concern that I see with writers at the high school level is where do I put my commas? L2a comma use is intended to address those issues. L2a asks that you can correctly use commas with non-essential phrases and clauses. In other words, extra information that you're adding into your sentences to make them more complex and to add in detailed description to your writing. At the 2 level, you may make some errors, so you're correct sometimes, but not always. At the 1 level, you're trying to use those non-essential phrases and clauses, but you're not using your commas correctly. At the 4 level, not only do you have the commas of the non-essential phrases and clauses, but you're really paying attention to how you use your complex sentences to actually enhance meaning. Okay, so perfect use, commas are all correct, but you're not using those complex sentences and those non-essential phrases all the time, only when they are most warranted. First thing we should probably consider is what is a non-essential element. I've got some examples here for you too. So a non-essential element is extra information or description to help build up your sentences, build up the image that you're trying to portray. As an example, the teacher, an undercover cop, so I'm giving extra information about the teacher, was very strict. They could also explain how or why the main action is happening, and then we're modifying our verb with our non-essential element. Reacting swiftly, the teacher told the student to leave the classroom, trying to save the other students from a scene. Reacting swiftly tells us more about how the teacher told the student to leave the classroom, and then trying to save the other students from a scene tells us why the teacher was so swift about it. The key with a non-essential element is that it can be removed from the sentence without changing the meaning. Okay, and so we could even look to see what these sentences would look like without those non-essential elements. We could very straightforward say the teacher was very strict. He told the student to leave the classroom. We just don't get a sense of how or why that went down. Now, the key comma rule for non-essential elements is that non-essential elements must be glued into the sentence with a comma, sometimes 2, depending on the placement. There are some exceptions to this, and we'll talk about those when we talk about the different types of non-essential elements. But for the most part, commas must be used when you have non-essential elements. Now, looking at those previous sentences that we had, we can see that our base sentence, the teacher told the student to leave the classroom, can be modified with our clauses, reacting swiftly to tell how the teacher told, glued on with a comma. An undercover cop to describe the teacher, glued in with a comma. And then trying to save the other students from a scene, information about why the teacher was so fast, glued in with a comma. Now, there are many different types of non-essential elements. We are only going to talk about 3 of them. Appositives are a noun describing a noun. Okay? So a noun is a person, place, or thing. And with an appositive, you are very intentionally taking one noun in your sentence, usually your subject, and giving extra information about them using another noun. In other words, you are defining your subject. As our example, the student, our noun that we're going to add an appositive to, a ninja in disguise. Ninja is a noun describing student, and then we have added a phrase on around it, a ninja in disguise, refused to leave the classroom. Notice we're gluing this in with commas. Prepositional phrases are our second type of non-essential element we're going to talk about, and a prepositional phrase is a phrase which explains a relationship, and it could be spatial, temporal, or logical. Spatial would be location of one object in comparison to another. Temporal would be the chronological. When did things happen? Okay. And then logical would be reasoning. Another way to think about that. The example we have here is a temporal one. After the ninja revealed himself, comma, the teacher yelled in triumph. Now, prepositional phrases are one of our exceptions to the comma rule. You would use comma to glue a prepositional phrase onto the beginning or the middle of a sentence. However, when you add on prepositional phrases to the end of a sentence, you do not always need a comma. In fact, you only need a comma with a prepositional phrase at the end of a sentence when you're creating some strong contrast. Okay, so let's make a note of that here for you. Comma at end for strong contrast only. Okay. So, for instance, if I were to say, the teacher yelled in triumph after the ninja revealed himself, I'm not looking to create any contrast here. I would not need a comma to glue that on. If I were to say, on the other hand, the teacher yelled in triumph, however, the ninja revealed himself, however is a strong contrast word, I would need to use a comma to glue that on. Present participle is our third type of non-essential element we will talk about. Present participle is very easy to identify. It's an ing verb used to describe. For example, the teacher charged the ninja, comma, we're going to glue this on, whipping out his taser as he went. So we have an ing verb, whipping out his taser as he went. We're describing what the teacher was doing. Here's a full paragraph example that we'll take a look at. Some of these sentences we've seen, some we have not. So I'm going to take a look through and talk about what I see as far as the positives, present participles, and prepositional phrases. So our first sentence, the teacher in undercover cop was very strict. I see commas, so that tells me I've got something going on here. There's a comma gluing an undercover cop in, as we already noted in our previous slide. Cop is a noun describing teacher. Therefore, we have an appositive. I'm going to label A for a positive. Reacting swiftly, the teacher told the student to leave the classroom, trying to save the other students from a scene. I already know that we have reacting swiftly as a non-essential element here, glued on with a comma about how the teacher told the student to leave. Reacting is an ing verb, so I know this is a present participle, so we'll abbreviate. I'm going to do present, since we've got several different versions of P's that we're working with here. Trying to save the other students from a scene, again, glued on with the comma. We have our non-essential element, it's another ing, so it's another present participle. Okay. The student and ninja in disguise refused to leave the classroom. So we've got our commas to glue our element in, a ninja in disguise, a ninja describes student. We have a positive. It's going to get kind of messy here, sorry. After the ninja revealed himself, the teacher yelled in triumph. We have a chronological connection here. After the ninja revealed himself, that will make it a prepositional phrase. I'm going to put prep for prepositional, glued on with a comma because it comes at the start, not at the end. The teacher charged the ninja, whipping out his taser as he went. We have an ing verb used to describe, therefore we have a present participle. Laughing maniacally, the ninja leapt to the ceiling. Laughing maniacally, ing verb, another present participle. Which caused tiles to cascade over the frightened students. Now this is a preposition here that would be used at the end, even with a comma, which always requires a comma. So let's get another one of those exception words. Because of the dust cloud, comma, the cop was unable to see the ninja's next move because it's a prepositional phrase. And remember, if we were to place it at the end of the sentence, the cop was unable to see the ninja's next move because of the dust cloud, we would not use a comma, but because it comes at the beginning, we will use a comma. And to close us, the ninja, a man-sized turtle, escaped once again. So we have our element here, turtle describes ninja. I've actually used dashes here, which will be in the next lesson. We'll talk about why you might choose to use a dash instead of a comma to introduce a non-essential element, but it will work just like the comma grammatically to set it aside. And we have our final positive to close out our non-essential elements.